Well, you listen to the Earth News Rebels show with me, Andy Peacher, and Kevin Bull.
We are receiving emails tonight from the States from people who are in serious trouble with the CPS as well. I didn't know whether you noticed, Andy. Desperately looking for help from her grandfather, by the looks of it, who's also in trouble currently. So we'll pick up on that later on as to the happenings on that side. But I don't know, how many people have we got in the chat? If anyone in the chat wants to pose any questions, raise any subjects, we can start off like we've done before on an open show. And if anyone wants to take it in any direction, we'll have a go going with it. That's one of the possibilities, or we can introduce something of our own.
That's a good idea, isn't it? To have an open chat for a change.
We can try. We can mooch along anyway as we're going through things. Right, I think we can give you some updates on some things that we've been covering. We've been covering the Irish children's rights referendum in a few of the shows, and we can tell you that the latest poll information is that the No campaign are currently 17% ahead. But of course they're not becoming complacent, they're campaigning right to the end. They are really outnumbered and doing everything they can. Joe Burns, who you heard broadcast from Spain on a couple of occasions on the show, has flown to Ireland tonight to a meeting to try and do a little bit more in Ireland, and that's what's happening in the No camp really on that side. I don't know if you picked up any more from what's happening in your protest side, Andy, in England.
No, I've not picked up much more, no, not yet.
Not much more on that. We are moving towards another show, which will possibly be towards the end of this month. It's something we've not covered before, which is going to be about housing benefit, which might be interesting to a lot of people, because housing benefit next year from April is going to be capped, and already people are having problems, aren't they, Andy?
Yeah, it's really annoying that at the moment people, especially in the big cities, in the nicer areas, I should put it, they can't afford to pay their rent basically, and what's even going to be more of a problem in the future, in April next year, the housing benefit level is going to be even capped further, so that will be a big issue.
It certainly will, and we're already receiving calls from people that are being made homeless with the removal of the housing benefit in some quite difficult situations, and they've got children as well, so it's really difficult, and it's a subject that we want to cover with it getting as bad as it is on that side. But of course, as well as the normal side we cover on child protection and the other issues we raise. What have we got on the agenda during the next few weeks on the shows, Andy? Can you give a clue to everyone what we've got coming up?
Yeah, we're talking vaccine damages again with Dr. Carley. We're talking about AIDS and the medical stuff behind that. We've got loads of people. I've just not got my diary.
You do well, Andy.
I think we have a caller, Mr. Paul. Good evening, sir. How are you?
Gents, how are you? Good evening. You okay?
Hello, Paul.
Hiya, right. Yeah, just with regard, just want to sort of crack on with the show. Yeah, it's a total Skype issue there. There was some kind of delay, and it was just bouncing back. So yeah, he was getting a double talk. So it's very hard, as you know, when you hear your own voice, sometimes it's a bit off-putting, especially when I hear my own voice. But what I wanted to ask you guys, really, just in general, because you're doing quite a few shows now. Here and with Orion Radio, and you're putting out a lot of good stuff. But in the general sort of consensus, really, with everything that we're dealing with at the station, people feel that we deal with the free men on the land aspects of trying to help people. My contention is that with the child abuse situation and the child stealing situation, we had Brian Clare on, as you know, a couple of weeks ago. That I think this is such a big topic that, if pushed in the right direction, as we are doing, this could be the ultimate straw that breaks the camel's back.
Yeah, actually, now I remember, November the 2nd, we have Mr. Robert Green on the show talking about Holly Gregg.
Excellent stuff.
So we're going to see a lot more from that side as well, Paul, to bring that on. I do agree with you, actually, Paul. Without the alternative media, CMR and Orion Talk Radio, these poor kids would really wouldn't have a voice anywhere, would they?
Yeah, I think also what Paul's saying, and a lot of people are saying it too, that to open the can of worms, you need something to open it with, and the child abuse and child stealing will open the can of worms. Everybody will go politely mad, and the government will start running for cover. Is that the right analogy?
Yeah, well, I think it's such. I'm finding that, and we're all learning, aren't we? And across the world, and we're all trying different things. We had a great result with Rob yesterday, Rob Freeman, who sort of beat the system, the court system. Then he was unlawfully sentenced. And so we are winning on different levels, but I just feel that the child stealing and abuse situation is so far-reaching, and it's been so long-standing that when this people are talking about Jimmy Savile now, aren't they?
Yes, it's gone that way now. I know on that as well, hasn't it, Paul? But that's getting a bit disturbing because they've moved on to someone else as well, and it seems to be the papers are going with a queue of people that are deceased now, which isn't very healthy on that side, because it's very difficult to have any kind of hearings around things like this to find out exactly what's happening.
Yeah, that annoys me a little bit. They're dead. End of. Whatever they've done wrong goes with them. It's the people that serve. I'm not going to say it, so don't panic. It's the people that serve for our authorities and our government that's done that sort of thing needs to be accounted for now.
I think that's where the main scale of this is. It's in institutionalised care where children are going into a care system that doesn't really work. It's known not to work. It's been known for decades not to work, purely by the statistics of children damaged coming out the other side and finishing up in the prison system, like in the US. They know it's over 80% of prisoners in the US have spent time in social services care, and this is what's really worrying. I was going to say, we've got a chance, we've got Paul on the show now. I think we ought to interview the radio manager, really, and find out all about CMR.
He always likes to go to bed early with his donuts and his Horlicks.
Oh, dear. It is nice where CMR's going, Paul, though. With the horizons opening, with the different shows and the different hosts on now, it's getting more interesting, isn't it?
It's the station. What are we, 5 months old? We are because everyone works at a team, and even listeners who are wanting to sort of be part of what we're all trying to do. It's fantastic. It's evolving naturally. There's no pushing in any way. With the concept was, let's help as many people as we can and be proactive instead of just talking all the time. And people attached to that, and this is where we're getting a lot of results from, because now people are saying, well, if you want something doing, go to Critical Mass Radio. They do stuff. They back you. They put it out. They don't just interview and then go away.
People are starting to click onto it as well, big time. We're starting to get inundated by emails now from people around the world looking for help with the angle that they've heard the Earth Needs Rebels isn't frightened to take people on and to try and help, which is what we're trying to do. But if you go back to the 1980s, 1970s, really, when FM radio first started. It started with the BBC sort of side of it, and then it became independent, and that's when these type of shows started with the phone-ins, and they were tremendous. And I like the style of these shows because they're doing the same thing the US side, where we're starting to move now towards phone-ins and the chance of people to possibly even raise things live if we can get a loop in there.
Well, Kevin, can I you're just saying there, you just sparked something. Forgive me, but in your experience and sort of life experience and everything, because you've been involved in all of this for longer than I have, and forgive me, but so you're saying that you've seen what in the last 5 years, maybe then a drastic sort of turnaround in what's happening, sort of results wise?
Oh, definitely. I mean, what you've got going. I know it's only 5 months, Paul, but this is right on. You're riding on the winning edge of this, because look at the growth of Orion Talk Radio and Jimmy. He's gone. He's over 1.5 million listeners a month now on the network on that side, and everyone's sort of linking up together. The interest is really good, because the advertisers as well will not miss out on a new marketplace. They'll move with this for sure. It's always happened that way, and of course. Everyone wants the voice, and the mainstream type characters are going to come on the show. We've already got doctors, professors, MPs, and experts coming on the show, and that will grow on all the shows, I think, as we go through this. And the interest for everyone as listeners is going to grow. The figures are going to grow, because we're really in the infancy of what we're doing at the moment. But it is a good parallel to what happened on FM, because there were some tremendous talk shows on FM before it got a bit stuffy again. So I think it's good that we're all doing this and having a go at it. I don't know how on earth we'd ever create a loop system, though, to give us a few seconds if things got out of hand.
Can I just say, though, that behind every good radio station is a good leader, and behind Critical Mass we have a good leader. He doesn't do much, but he encourages in ways that even we don't know.
Do you know what, Andy? It takes a lot to shut me up. No, it's I don't need to really sort of be that hands-on with anyone, because we're all adults. I mean, about a month ago, I went through a conflict because we were getting so many people trying to stop what we were doing. It was getting too much. It was crazy. There was no sort of care for what we were doing. It was just people coming and using us and leaving us with a lot of sort of back-end trolls, etc. But what I mean by that is now it worked in a funny way, where I thought, the gloves are off, but now let's just go on it, because it's the only way we can beat. And I know I had lengthy conversations with you, Kevin, on certain aspects, and it has helped. And this is where we're up to now, where. And since then, I must say that the station has jumped forward, because we've dealt head on with a lot of opposition from idiots who are just out there just to make trouble. They've got no care for anything apart from they sit there all day, eating, just bored, upsetting people.
I think we'll always have that. It's just the nature of things, but it's just a matter of riding out the storm, because this is providing a service for everyone to use, and all the different areas they want, a topic they want to raise on these shows. And it is really, it's part of the public domain. So it shouldn't be spoiled. It shouldn't be allowed to be spoiled, and that's why all of us support you, really, in anything that you get. It's mutual, I know. To try and ride out these things and get all the decent shows building up. There's already a good range of hosts on CMR now, and the shows are getting more and more interesting all the time, and that's quite quick for 5 months, really, isn't it, Paul?
Yeah, well, again, I think what you're saying there is right. I keep saying it's our time now. It's on everything we do. It's our time now. Now it's our turn, because it feels like a natural time in history, even, that everyone's coming together now and waking up, and a lot of proactive people out there, and people like Brian Gerrish, who have really put the neck out, and now people are getting behind that, and there's more and more people standing up, and like even Brian Clare, what that man does and what he goes through every day, and they can't be left on their own. People like that have to have support, and that's where we're coming. And also, it's bringing awareness, and you hear some really harrowing stories from a lot of guests, and it only makes you want to do more. And this is where you guys come in as well, because I mean, what you're knocking out about 4 or 5 shows on different stations a week now, you guys, and this is the kind of work ethic, because you guys don't get paid for it, and you guys donate to the station, as all hosts do, and that's what keeps it running. And that is the kind of commitment that is needed, and people do put forward.
Yeah, over time, of course, it becomes very self-financing anyway, with the level of advertising, as we'll back it as we go on, because the figures will go up, and, it'll grow in that direction. But already, the nice thing is that we've got somewhere to raise issues that are just missing out of the mainstream pretty well altogether. And because of that, we're seeing some things going back into mainstream from what we're doing. And that is very promising, because if the mainstream are looking in our side to pick up potential for new shows or new interviews and that, they're obviously watching very closely what we're doing, Paul.
We actually had a chap from Liverpool City Radio on George's show, the Prisoner Show, last night, and he's trying to get information out about chemtrails, etc. And he's hearing about what we're doing, on non-FM stations. So this is with non-FM, you have more freedom to say what needs to be said, and the higher up you go, when you start touching FM, etc., you can only sort of get away with so much. And there's so many non-FM stations, it's very hard to police. So that's why, I think people on internet radio are hearing the truth to a degree firsthand. But I'm just really interested, Kevin, to, like you say, with your experience now and everything that you're doing, that you've seen that over the time scale, you've seen it turn around, which I find fascinating.
It's like a cycle. The only way I can describe it is because internet radio is relatively new and it's in its infancy, that there is a style develops which is really healthy of new people coming into radio and doing these things, and whatever develops beyond that. But if you were there to see the FM days back in the 70s when it was launched, it was the same. I know it was FM and everything else, but the shows that developed were rather, interesting that way. The phone-ins were great. In Ireland, we've still got shows like that, more than you have in the UK. There's one of the shows I can name, I don't think anyone can get it over there, and you could probably get it on the internet actually. It's the Joe Duffy Show, which you'd be stunned to listen to. If you actually listen to the Joe Duffy Show, it's a total phone-in show where you'll get a little Irish grandmother phoning in. Kate's going to get me the details of where to find the show. And if you actually listen to that, it has a lot of similarities to what everyone's doing on CMR and on Orion Talk Radio, because it's still very social in Ireland. People are very social. It's called Liveline on RT1, which you'll find is very much like the early FM shows with the phone-ins. And everyone knows in Ireland that if they've got a problem, go and ring the Joe Duffy Show. So that's sort of what's happening with us. We're getting emailed left, right and centre at the moment with people that have got issues. We don't always bring it on the show. We sometimes deal with it in the legal side. Kate, my wife, runs International Rescue for Families, so we can support people if it's a welfare issue or if it's a legal issue behind the scenes. We work with welfare departments. All of this is invisible to the shows, believe it or not, but it's all happening behind the show along with research. Paul. Okay,
so I mean, as you say, there's this turnaround, and people getting something that Brian Gerry said was, and it stays with me. It's probably, and actually you said something a bit more eloquent yourself, Kevin. But basically, when you get a result against these people at the top, you are empowered, and you take a strength from that, and you move forward. And I'm getting that strength, and I know a lot of other guys that we all working with are finding that, and it is very, very empowering. And it takes away this image of the powers that be are untouchable and we can't get there no matter what we do. But I am starting to find, and very, very quickly and more often, that we can make a huge impact, and we are, and these guys are not what they think we are.
No, I think I do agree before, Paul, what you were saying, that the children are not the cause, but they are it's going to change things in the future. You have to open some worms up. The children will be the cause. I mean, they tried the taxes, didn't they? For many years, they raised the taxes. You're told to stand in queues. You're told to do this, do that, put on hold when you call a call centre. Then they decided to abuse and steal the children. I mean, we don't want them to go past that stage, because they'll be putting chemicals in us and treating us like robots. So we have to make the abuse of the children the last abuse ever, so then the adults can get on with their lives.
It's got to a point, Andy, where I think the things you mentioned there have been in play for so long now that if we're going from child abuse to call centres, it's still a form of control. I mean, how many times, but it's indicative of what we're used to, is you call up a service and they say to you, can you please speak your details now and your account number, and then as soon as you get through to somebody, they ask you all the same questions that you've just put through to an answer machine, and it's all to keep you on, it's all to take details, and it's all to make more money off you while you stay on the phone. Well, this is the control from the moment, like you say, you step out your door, you make a phone call, we're being directed into their game, and this is why the work that you do and everybody else is breaking that system down, because little things like call centres, people are doing shows about that and are starting campaigns about that. As trivial as it seems, it's all part of the makeup and what we are subjected to every day.
Well, one of the areas we're going into now, Andy and I were only just talking about it, because of the cases coming in wanting support, we can only do a certain amount, but we can redirect people elsewhere as well as direct involvement ourselves. What it means is that we get a chance to deal with real cases. This is where we're going next, Paul, where we will take on cases of supporting people with their supporters as well and bring that into the show if that's what it needs. It will be very client-based. In other words, if it's not in their interest to come on the radio, they won't, and it will be their situation that's considered first. But if it is an advantage to come on the radio, then they'll do it. So what will hopefully happen is rather like the Jack Duffy show, shall we say, and the early FMs, where people came and they had a voice. It was eventually gagged over a period of time. The shows became very spoon-fed main system shows eventually, and any kind of controversy disappeared off them really quickly. And that was unfortunate. But we've got a chance again to do it now. You can always tell when the voice of the people is very stifled by looking at the difference between what the mainstream are saying and what you see in any alternative area. And by God, haven't we got a difference in what's being stated between the two? And it's not all conspiracy theory stuff. We've got some really sensible hosts putting out information, sensible guests, trying to make a difference. And we've got a dramatic difference now between what we can see in the mainstream media and what is happening in the alternative media.
Excellent stuff. Excellent. Well, I do believe you're going to try your guest again and see if he's managed to sort his Skype out. So I'll leave you be, guys, and I'll come back later if the guest can't be obtained.
All right. Paul. Nice to speak with you.
Thanks, Paul. We do have a standby anyway.
Cheers, mate. Ciao.
We're trying again to bring in David. Are you there, David? Captain David Williams, the deaf whale.
Hello.
Is that any better?
Yeah, there's no feedback now. It sounds good.
You've sorted it then, or technology?
The problem is fixed. The problem is now this Kevin Bull is not on there.
No, if he comes back on and you're having problems with feedback, then we know who to blame.
Now, absolutely. Blame Kevin Bull. Don't blame me.
There you are, David. I've just unmuted. Are you getting feedback now?
No.
That's okay. It's probably just a Skype connection problem that we sometimes get. Not to worry. Listen, David, I've had a good read into your website and some fascinating stuff in there that I never knew about whales. Please enlighten us.
Well, where do you want to start? I mean...
Well, if you go back to the origins of this, the bit that I was reading was everyone seemed so confused as to why whales were beaching themselves. Everyone was coming up with every idea under the sun, from mass suicides as a concept to it, to all kinds of different types of bacteria, worms, anything interfering with the functioning. That'd probably be a good thing to start and look at how long the history goes back to I think it pre-Jesus Christ, over 2,000 years ago, having records of this, was it, David?
Yeah. Let me get my screen set here. I'm just trying to get I almost give up on you guys, so I'm trying to come back and open up my pages. Well, as far as we know, whales have been stranding for millions of years. This is not some new behavior. This is something that's been going on since long before man ever showed up on the face of the earth. So, I mean, just the history of strandings, man has got to step aside on these mass beachings, because you got to look for a cause in nature, not in man. And the biggest mistake people are making, they're trying to blame man, and man is not the cause of these mass beachings. Man is causing a lot of other strandings, but not these mass beachings where the animals, like happened a few weeks ago in Scotland.
Yes.
Those whales were injured by an earthquake, and if you think about it for just a second, earthquakes kill more people on land than any other thing. I mean, millions and millions of people have died in earthquakes, and why exclude this from killing marine mammals too? I mean, 9 out of 10 earthquakes on the planet occur in the ocean. There's 500,000 earthquakes recorded every year on the planet. I'm talking about anywhere from 2 magnitude all the way up to a 9 magnitude. 500,000 earthquakes every year on the planet. 450,000 of these are in the backyard of the whales. So it only seems reasonable to start looking at how can an earthquake at sea injure whales. And this, the idea that we're going to blame it on some leader, some pod leader, he gets sick and he leads the whales into the beach, and he calls them in, and they all run in and commit suicide just to save the pod leader, is horse manure. I mean, it don't even make sense. It's just some goofy idea that started years ago. The pod leader theory, for example, first began in like 1870. They used to call these whales not pilot whales. You used to call them blackfish or pothead whales, and they would notice that when they would beach 100 years ago, there was always one whale that was leading out in front, and he would swim into the sand. So they started calling them pilot whales because the rest of them were following this one whale into the sand. Well, when you stop to think about it, if a group of people walk off the top of a skyscraper, there's got to be some idiot out in front. I mean, it doesn't mean because the dummy jumps off the top of the building first that he's the leader and leading everybody else to jump off. It just means that he's probably the one with the least amount of brains. I mean, do you understand my point? Do you see what I'm saying?
I definitely do. You can understand how humans have observed this over years and years and tried to come up with the best answer to it, but nothing really adds up. I'm not going to push you ahead of where you are. I'd rather you tell the whole thing and give the history of how you got the original ideas behind this and everything, because I think it's really interesting how you've worked out what's possibly happening and then gone further. And unless you've got the history behind it of what people thought, then it isn't evident why you've drawn the conclusions you have now. Do you know where I'm going, David, on that?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I attended a few strandings. I'm a sea captain, and I've spent a lot of time at sea, and I've observed a lot of whales. I've observed a lot of pods of whales swimming along. I've watched them. I've always been fascinated by them, thinking, how beautiful they were. And in the late 60s and early 70s, I had the opportunity to be near a beach when whales stranded. And it really moved me. It moved me quite a bit. And I really wanted to do something for them. And it just appeared to me that before I could help them in any way, I was going to have to figure out why they did what they did. I mean, I couldn't see helping them if I didn't understand the behavior. So I just this lifelong quest to unravel this mystery of why they beach themselves started in the early 1970s, 1971, something along there. And I started reading books about whales. I started reading all the old stories about whaling. There's 40 or 50 books all written about the whalers and what they did and what they saw, and I was just convinced that somewhere in all this mess was the clue to what was going on. And after that, I started observing them. Every time I would see a pod of whales, I would try to get my ship close to them. I had field binoculars, and I would zero in on them. I'd watch them. I would trail them. I'd stay behind them. And after a period of time, I began to notice that every so often, the pods I was seeing would act completely different. Make a long story short, I started to notice that some of these pods were swimming downstream. They were just going with the current. Whichever way the current goes, that's the way they were going. And they were swimming differently. They had a sort of a methodical swim to them. They were just up and down, like they weren't having any fun at all. They weren't. I mean, they're so much different when you've observed 200 or 300 pods swimming out in the open sea to see one group that's leaping in the air and going this way and that way and flipping over and all kinds of other what looks to me like joyful things, and then you see this other group that's just plodding along. Like, why are they just plodding along? What's wrong with them?
Was that drew your attention to it in the first place, the fact you could see the differences in behavior?
Yeah, well, that's what I started to see the difference, and then I started to get close up to a couple of these pods that I was watching. We got close enough, and we could look in the water behind them, and we seen sharks.
Uh-huh.
I said, my God, look at, there might be 50 or 60 sharks following these whales. And I thought, the sharks must know something's wrong with the whales. And that was the first clue as to what this stranding mystery was all about. The whales were obviously in trouble. They weren't acting like the other whales at all. I mean, they weren't acting like their own species. They weren't jumping. They weren't swimming in any other way. They were just a close-knit group with a pack of sharks following them, like wolves follow caribou. Obviously, the sharks knew something was wrong with the whales, and obviously the whales knew something was wrong with them too, because when you look at that scene and you see it happening in front of your eyes, you got to know that these animals aren't healthy. Something is definitely wrong. And then when you see them start moving, when they're always going with the flow of the current, and you're trailing them, and you're going downstream all the time that you're trailing these pods, the next conclusion is these whales are lost. Now let me kind of explain this. So let me preference this right now. Are you a swimmer? Have you ever done any swimming in the ocean, Kevin?
I've done a bit of swimming and shallow diving, yes.
Yeah. Well, water is 700 times more dense than air. There's a great resistance to swimming upstream. I mean, you can imagine you crossing a fast-moving river, and you decide to go upriver, and you're going to swim against all that current. You're going to have a hard time. But if you turn downstream and you go with the current, it's very easy. I mean, do you agree with that? I mean, is that not common sense?
Absolutely. It absolutely makes sense. I mean, I haven't done a bit of swim, but my experiences were less interesting. I unfortunately, many years ago, finished up swimming in the Atlantic in close to Africa, not realising about sharks. And it wasn't until I got about a mile out that I noticed a fishing boat going by, chucking out shark food, shall we say, and shark fishing trawler on the side. I found out I could swim on top of the water going back in, actually.
Yes,
it was quite amazing.
Walk on water then, right? Walk on water.
So, that was my realisation about sharks.
Well, I mean, as simple as it sounds, you say, okay, water is much denser, there is a lot of drag to swimming against the flow. So you come up with this thing that anything swimming in a current without a sense of direction will be turned by the current and pointed downstream. It's the physics of the thing. If you don't know where you're going, I can't believe it took me so long to get this simple little fact straight in my own head. I even denied it. You know, I denied that it was so powerful. I took a bunch of my shipmates one time, and I blackened all their face plates. We just painted them all black with these masks on, and I threw these guys in the sea in a current, and I said, okay, everybody just swim any which way you want to go. And within 15 seconds, all of them going downstream. It was just an amazing sight to watch the current just turn them around and downstream they go. And so, I mean, it didn't come like I'm telling you this story. It didn't come that fast for sure. It took a lot of thinking.
How long were you observing for over the whole length of time? It must have been years, John, to get the concept of what you were doing. I
started working on this thing in the early 1970s, like 1971. In 1972, a group of my buddies came to me, and they said, you know, why don't you start a Save the Whales group and get a corporation, a non-profit corporation, what they call in the United States a 501c, so that you can people can give you money. And back in those days, Greenpeace was raking in the dough. My goodness, those guys were raking in $30 million a year. And so everybody said to me, start this Save the Whales group. You know, you got all this, and people will give you money, and you'll be rich. And I said, okay, but I don't have any money to start the group. And these guys got together, and they chipped in $500, and we formed, in 1972, we formed the Moby Dick Society. After the great white whale of Moby Dick. And after we got it all set up, we had the 501c and we had everything, you know, and since that time, nobody ever gave me a dime. I never felt comfortable asking for money. The more I got into this thing, I was doing it out of passion. The more I got into it, the more crooks I seen in the business, and I just didn't want to be like them. I didn't want to go out and say, give me money. My pride wouldn't let me, you know.
I do sense your passion, actually. I think everyone does. You can see it there. That's driving you along here.
Yeah, it became to me like unraveling this monstrous puzzle. I mean, I love the whales, and I spent a lot of time alone in a closet crying over this stuff. I mean, they really, you know. But I've often wondered what really pushed me, and it's like 50% of what pushed me was I wanted to solve this bloody puzzle. I wanted to be the first man on earth to figure out, and I wanted to be famous. I remember reading about Aristotle, the great Greek philosopher. How he said back in 340 years before the birth of Christ, he couldn't figure out why these whales were beaching themselves. And I remember sort of daydreaming that, you know, maybe if I could solve this mystery of why they swim into this beach, I could be famous like Aristotle, and all the girls would love me. You know.
I'm with you, John. David, I'm with you.
I mean, this celebrity like the great Aristotle, and wow, you know, all the attention and everything else. The smartest man on the planet figured out why these whales were beaching themselves. That was the...
Yeah, you got really wrapped up in the passion of this. I can tell you did. I can tell from your websites and that. It's all there, isn't it?
Well, you know, the whales hooked me. I mean, I got trapped. It's like an addiction. I became hooked. I became addicted to these things. I mean, I became really just can't leave it alone. And I've been that way ever since. I mean, I've been obsessed with getting to the bottom of this thing. And then now that I think I'm to the bottom of it, I'm sort of obsessed with getting the word out. I want people to know what I know. I'm 71 years old. I don't want to work all my life to sort something out and then die and take the secret with me. That would be a waste of time for sure, you know. I mean, that would have really, you know, I don't want to have a heart attack tomorrow and people like Kevin Bull and Andrew Peacher don't know anything about my work, you know. I want you guys to know it, so once you know it, then and we spread it around and the world knows it, then I can die in peace.
Well, you're certainly going to have some MP3s that we have on the site afterwards to point anyone to from the show, and possibly, you know, a follow-on show which we talked to you about, because they're really useful to get the information out with your websites of what this is all about. What really interested me is how you got from virtually nothing and all these different ideas. I'm not going to name what the answer to this is, because I'm going to leave that for you. But how did you progress towards finding the answer to this?
Most of it came, you know, like you're trying to sort one particular thing out, and you spend months thinking about it. You know, I relate this to like being able to concentrate, you know, for 6 months on the head of a pen. I mean, you become obsessed with one thought. You know, why, and you just keep thinking about this, and you focus it in your mind, and it really, it's a sickness. I think it's something wrong. My brain's not wired right.
I think you've got a creative mind that needed to focus on something, and it's focused on something that's really useful, you know, and productive.
Well, the problem is when you know. Well, let me skip all that. Let's get on into what happens to these whales. When I was able to figure out they were going with the current, that made a lot of sense to me, and it's just one sort of thing after another. If they're swimming with the current, they're lost. They don't know where they're going. And if they're lost, why? And I started trying to figure out, well, you know, the first thing I came up with is we know they use sound to navigate. So maybe they're deaf. And then I applied the model of deaf whales, you know, to okay, if they're deaf, they can't navigate, they go with the flow, and the flow washes them into a beach. I mean, the current is what builds the beach in the first place. Where there's an inward flow of current, there's a sandy beach. Where there is no inward flow or landward flow of current, there's no beach. There's rocks or there's mud. So the current is the energy building the beach. The current is the energy that's directing the whales. So the current is the whales have got to be deaf. That was the first conclusion.
Literally going with the flow because they are deaf. That's what you're saying, isn't it, David?
That was the first conclusion back in the 80s, and I decided, okay, the Moby Dick Society name didn't. I got this pop in my every time somebody pops a thing on the. Let me see if I can't stop this pop. Every time somebody makes a chat remark, I get a bang in my ear here.
Yeah, just above chat and go, at the bottom, there's a left, near a little envelope, there's a left button.
Yeah.
Mute.
Where's that? Oh, I see it right there. Okay.
That's the one.
Yeah. Good. Okay, that's better. Yeah. So where am I now? Okay, I'm sorry. So
could you explain, because everyone won't have your knowledge and understanding, David, how do whales find their way about? What is their mechanism, that they use with hearing? How does it work in a simple way for people to understand, listeners to understand?
All right. Let me see if I can put this in everyday language. This is they have evolved this fantastic hearing biosonar system. This has evolved over 50 million years, and it's evolved slowly, and they fine-tuned it, and it's a marvelous system. What they do is they use air in their head. By the way, the average toothed whale, 30% of the volume, the cranial volume of the whale, is air. So if you call them airheads, you'd be technically correct, because air plays a very important part in their acoustic abilities underwater. I mean, air underwater is like a mirror is in air. It bounces sound waves. Air, when the sound wave hits a pocket of air underwater, it just bounces back off. Air is the acoustic impedance mismatch between air and water is so great that very little of the energy will penetrate into the air, especially if it comes at an angle. If there's an angle, it just hits and bounces off like light bouncing off a mirror. And over time, evolution grew these sinuses inside their head and started using these air pockets to reflect sound and bounce it around inside the animal's head in such a way to make its biosonar work. The sinuses also surround the animal's cochlea. The volume of these clicks that these whales make is so loud, it's on the order of 220 decibels. And that 220 decibels is generated inside their head. It's so loud that if they didn't protect their cochlea with something, they would deafen their own selves. They could have never got that volume up that high unless evolution helped them by slowly evolving these air sacs that surround the cochlea. So if you imagine the inner ear of a whale, and if you imagine the inner ear of a whale as being a grape inside a coconut at the center, there's ligaments running from the inside wall of the coconut running down to the cochlea, and this thing is suspended like you would suspend a microphone on wires right in the middle of the room. And all around this system is an envelope of air. And these whales, the air protects the cochlea so that the delicate cochlea doesn't get destroyed when the whale raises up the volume of these clicks. The air also channels the sound. The air also prevents the the various echoes from coming from all directions. What happens is the sound enters the lower jaw, the clicks go out, the echoes come back and enter the lower jaw and go through a fat channel and circle around and come through an opening in the air sacs and strike the cochlea in only one direction. And what the whale can do then, by just turning his head slightly left or right, he can zero in on where the sound is coming from and create an image with this acoustics. And for example, their eighth cranial nerve is the largest nerve, and that's the eighth cranial nerve is the acoustic nerve. Their brain is very large. All this is to store acoustic images. They create a picture out of sound like we create a picture out of visual clues. I mean, they're just unbelievably talented acoustically. And they can send these... Go ahead.
Yeah, so the picture I'm getting, David, is of a highly intelligent creature with quite amazing abilities that's going to know where the rest of the pod are by the clicks being stored in information, to know almost able to look at a film going backwards possibly to some degree, to know what's happened as well as what's happening there as then, to hold a whole field of vision in a kind of three-dimensional way. Is that what's happening with the whale?
Well, they're able to send these clicks to the seafloor and read the echo and create a picture of what the bottom looks like. For example, you know when you're in downtown London simply by the way the buildings look. Well, these animals know when they're over their feeding ground by the way the bottom looks. They know where they are because they've been there before. I mean, they're not using geomagnetic signals. They're not using any kind of built-in compasses. They're using acoustics. They navigate with acoustics, and they create mental pictures of where they go, and they can get back to those spots simply by looking acoustically at the bottom, and then that's the way they navigate. And these sinuses play the major role in the function of this system. I used to believe that it was the cochlea. I focused on the inner ear itself. I focused on deafness, and I was wrong. I was wrong for almost 15 years. We even called ourselves, we changed the name from Moby Dick Society to the Deaf Whale Society, because we were trying to promote the idea that deafness was the major cause of beachings.
David, we have a pressing question. It's regarding what you've been talking about. It's disappeared from the chat box now. Apart from this person wants to know, where do you get your research from, and how can you kind of prove what you're saying? And it goes on to another point, because I've lost the other one now in the chat box. It says if the base premise is flawed, or premises, it's spelled Premise, is flawed, how can you build a proper picture? Whales are not people. We can't say because we do this or think that, then the whales must too. Where is he getting this mental picture stuff from?
Okay, so where
that may be a negative, I don't know.
Right. It is a negative. It's,
basically, where do you get your information from? And here we go. I'll give you the original question was.
No, it's okay. I understand the question. I understand. Where do I come up with my knowledge?
Basically, how do you know how whales navigate? Where do you get information from? Because most say we need more research to prove it.
Yeah. Well, let's just set that on the side for a second. Let's just come back to that. That's a very good question. That sounds like somebody that believes very strongly in marine mammal science. And I'm going to come back in a few minutes, and I'm going to show you where this marine mammal science has made a lot of mistakes. Any rate, back where I was talking about before, we thought it was in the ear. And then over a period of years, I started looking at these sinuses. And I remember reading in 1990, 91. I mean, where I get my knowledge from, I've read practically every scientific paper there is on whales. I've read every book 2 or 3 times. I mean, in 40 years, you can do a lot of reading, you know. And I've spent probably half of the last 40 years inside a library. And I've been digging and digging and digging and sorting and sorting and sorting. So my knowledge comes from everything I've read and everything that made sense to me. I've rejected a lot of things that didn't make sense to me. So that's where my awareness comes from. But let me proceed on. At least I get lost in the unimportant stuff. When I was looking at deafness as an issue, and I strongly believed in that in the 80s, I thought that a loud noise underwater had deafened these pods of whales. And naturally, my choice would have been that an undersea volcano had exploded. That was my big thing. This is undersea volcanoes. One blew up, a very loud noise, and it deafened the entire pod. So I started talking to Navy scientists. I started calling them on the phone. And then I knew the Navy was recording all this noise that goes on. They're listening for ships. They're listening for enemy submarines. They're listening all the time. So I wanted them to tell me whether a volcano had exploded in a certain area or not. Well, they came back and said, no, we don't listen to impulsive noise. We filter that out. What we're listening for is the steady beat of a propeller and the sound of the engine. I said, okay. So in 1986 or 87, there was a group of false killer whales that stranded in Key West, and I happened to be down there. And I know Key West waters really well. I did a lot of fishing there. And a friend of mine was at the airport in the tower when this helicopter called in and wanted to know if anybody knew where this place called Mule Key was. And he called me up. He said, you know where Mule Key is, Captain? I said, yeah, I know where it's at. And the next thing you know, this helicopter wanted a guide to take them to Mule Key. And it was a pilot whale stranding, not a pilot whale, a false killer whale stranding. So I jumped in the helicopter and I guided them to Mule Key, and here's 20 or 30 pilot whales laying in the sand. And we spent the whole day with this. This was Channel 10 News in Miami. We spent the whole day with this news team and made all kinds of footage. I mean, just everything. So when we got all through, the news team said, how much do we pay you for your services? I said, no. I said, what I want is a copy of all that film. I want that raw film footage. And the newscaster says, you got it. You can have it. No problem. Thank you very much. We'll make a copy for you. We'll get it to you. And sad part about it is about a week after he did this film, this newscaster died of a massive heart attack. And I never got the film that we made. But somebody invited me to write an article about this and say, what happened to these whales? So I did a search upstream using my current thing. I knew that the injury had to happen upstream, so I went upstream from Mule Key, and I came to a volcano in the Caribbean called Kick 'em Up Jenny. And Kick 'em Up Jenny had exploded. Every 10 years it blows its top, and the top of the volcano is about 500 feet from the surface of the sea. And this was it. Kick 'em Up Jenny blew up, and this is what caused these killer whales to beach themselves. And so I finally got a hold of the University of Trinidad. I got a hold of a seismologist down there, a guy that headed the department. And I said, look, on a certain such a day, Kick 'em Up Jenny exploded, right? And he said, no. I said, oh, come on, man. Tell me Kick 'em Up Jenny blew up. He says, no, I can't tell you that. He says, Kick 'em Up Jenny has been quiet for years. And he said, what do you want to know for? And I told him about my angle with the whales and all this other stuff. He said, well, I can't tell you Kick 'em Up Jenny exploded. He said, but I can tell you on the day you're asking, we had a 6.2 earthquake not far away. I said, what? And he said, we had a 6.2 earthquake. And I took the information and I hung up and I started thinking about it. 6.2 earthquake, not a volcano. How can an earthquake in the seafloor injure whales in the water column? I mean, they're feeding on squid somewhere and this earthquake is down in the bottom. How is that going to hurt them or knock out their biosonar? And it just didn't come to me. I mean, it took me a while to sort all it out. And then I said, well, my goodness. I finally got to the idea that the seafloor dancing up and down acted like a piston and generating a series of pressure waves. So these sea quakes were causing these pressure changes, and the pressure changes were blowing out the sinuses, and the sinuses must have as much to do with echo-navigation as does the cochlea. So then I started researching the sinuses and digging into that sort of thing. And then it turned out, sure enough, if there's sinus damage, the whale loses its sense of direction because the signals aren't reflected and aren't channeled properly to make the biosonar work. So the more I got into it, the more important the sinuses were, and not the ears, not the cochleas. So then I headed off into this direction of barotrauma in the sinuses. And I thought, okay, I'll go to the library and I'll dig up all this stuff on barotrauma and I'll read what all the scientists have got to say about barotrauma, And I'll also read about what they got to say about how whales navigate. And I'll also read about what they got to say about how the whale ended up on the beach. So then I start digging up all this stuff, and there's nothing. I was blown away. There's no information on barotrauma at all. And it turns out that the scientists don't know anything about barotrauma. I said, oh my gosh, I was encouraged because the discovery of why whales beach themselves, if scientists knew about it, I mean, they would have already discovered it. But if they don't know about it, okay, I found something they don't know. So the more I started studying barotrauma, it's a simple diving-related injury. I mean, it's the most common injury in scuba divers.
It absolutely makes sense. It absolutely makes sense where you're going here. Not only that, the human side of it, we're totally different creatures. But if we, so much as blow our nose with sinuses, we can completely interfere with our balance mechanism or our hearing through the sinuses themselves. So I'm presuming whale sinuses are much more complex than human sinuses.
Far more complex. Oh, my goodness. I mean, like I said earlier in the show, if you call a whale an airhead, you'd be technically correct. 30% of his cranial volume is air. So the air has got to play an important role, and it's got to be, it has to do a lot with his acoustics. So here I am, and I'm saying, well, wait a minute. Don't the scientists know anything about barotrauma? I mean, it seems so natural to me that if I'm a whale scientist, I'm going to say, well, I wonder if a whale ever suffers a diving-related injury. They dive almost every day of their life. They live for 50 years. Do they ever make a mistake and have a little sinus injury where they got to sit out and they can't dive for a few days? You know, it sounded so natural to me that I said, why don't scientists look into this barotrauma thing? What's the problem? I mean, why have they avoided this thing? So then I started trying to figure out, well, okay, how do whales navigate? So then, when you when you go to find out what the scientists have to say about how whales navigate, whoops, there's another blank wall. They say they don't know. You know, they don't know how whales navigate. I mean, the most acoustically superior animal in the world. And scientists won't admit that they use sound to navigate. I said, oh, now, what am I looking at here? They're not going to admit, you know, they're not going to talk about barotrauma. Hold on a minute. They're not going to talk about barotrauma. They're not going to talk about how whales navigate. And then I start looking at the current going into the beach, and I start looking at videos. I start seeing. I start reading about how every time there's a whale, if you go to a lot of these whale rescues, if you get there with the camera quick enough, you'll see the wind blowing through the announcer's hair, and the buzzing of the microphone. The wind is just so loud, the microphone is picking it up. You can't hardly hear what's going on. And you can see the wind is the waves. You go out and you look at all these strandings. Here comes all the sea coming in, 5-6 foot waves, white caps. You know, the wind is blowing towards the shore. Hello, the wind is what controls the current. So, if the wind is blowing the current ashore, and the whales aren't navigating, the wind and the current is what's causing the whales. So why aren't the whales navigating? Well, it goes back to that thing again. Scientists don't know how whales navigate. They refuse to look at that part. Oh, I gotta find something for my throat here.
You get yourself a glass of water or whatever.
Yeah, I got a coffee here. Any rate, there is so much vacuum out there in very common sense. It's like scientists are this whale scientists, and I'm not talking about science in general, I'm talking about whale scientists. Whale scientists are this really heady group of experts, you know, and they have all this knowledge, and then there's this group of groupies that follow what the scientists say, and it's sort of like this. Scientists have the same attitude. If a scientist don't say it, it's not true. I mean, if a scientist don't come along and tell you that it's raining outside, it's not raining, you know. So they like to defeat my work by saying, well, what do the scientists say? And when it comes to my work, the scientists are mute. They don't say anything. You know, it's like they have nothing to say. And I find that rather strange. Especially when you think about it, this barotrauma is a pressure-related illness. And the Navy and the oil industry, their instruments induce massive pressure changes into the marine environment, and they're the ones that finance 90% or 98% of what the scientists of the scientific research into whales and dolphins. So maybe they don't want to finance anything about barotrauma because they already know.
Quite possible, isn't it, David? Because they must have quite a bit of knowledge on that side, because it's all related to submarine side of things, the diving side of things, and everything they're doing, the changes in pressure.
Well, I mean, the Navy is the United States Navy is the greatest experts in scuba diving and pressure-related injuries and divers. You know, they have the Navy Dive Manual. Everybody follows the Navy Dive Manual, and the Navy Dive Manual's got 40 some odd pages that talk about barotrauma. But then when you go to the Navy Whale Manual, barotrauma is not there. It was like, okay, hold on a second. Can we take a break? I got to get something on this throat of mine.
We certainly can. We can go into a music break for a few minutes. You get yourself sorted, David. It's very interesting what you're telling us.
Okay, I'll be right back.
Okay, just mute your microphone while we go into a break, my friend.
All right, done deal here.
Thank you. Andy, do you want to take it into a break? Andy? It looks like we've lost Andy temporarily on this, so we'll just chat along a bit while we try and get Andy back. But it's very interesting what David's saying around this as the story's developing, because if you go to his website, which if I can get research to put the website is on there, and you go and have a look at this, there's an immense amount of detail there on how different ideas developed going in this direction over the years to where we're going now, looking at pressure changes. I mean, I'm getting a picture as a layperson in the background of this and thinking to myself, well, earthquakes, tsunami, I can quite easily see pressure changes that we know occur in that, which is going to certainly affect things in this way. So it's starting to fit together as a picture, really, as to a strong possibility of what's happening here, especially if you consider that you've got often, a complete pod affected very suddenly in the same way. The original bacterial ideas and worm ideas don't seem to tie up. How on earth each whale could be affected at the same time doesn't seem to work. It really needs to be an answer of something quite sudden happening to them to change how they're functioning in that way. Are you about yet, Andy?
I'll say I'm about, yeah, why?
Do you want to go into a music break while David just gets a drink for his cough?
Yeah, remember we've only probably got 10 minutes anyway.
Okay, we'll if we go into a short music break and then come out the other side.
Okay, then I'll try and find a short one.
Okay.
I weren't paying attention, to be honest.
Oh dear.
Good day, public. We are anonymous. Operation Jubilee, 5th of November, 2012. Gather peacefully at the Parliament Building, London, to declare the true Jubilee. Cancel all debt. Stop war. Redistribute the land. And eliminate poverty.
It's time.
With enough faith, united together we can move a mountain. It's going to take all of us. We are all anonymous. It's time to stand up for yourself, your family and your country. Show up and count yourself in the 99% anonymous millions. There can be no forgiveness without true and full repentance. If you do not repent, we cannot forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.
CMR Critical Mass Radio is a completely non-profit station where the hosts pay to broadcast their shows. The mission of the station is to get as much information as possible out to people about the world we live in, to unite like-minded people, and to try to come up with workable solutions. If you agree with the work that we are doing, then please feel free to help us continue by making a donation on the webpage. CMR is for people who want answers, because now it is our turn.
Yeah, you're listening to Andy, Peter and Kevin Ball. It's the Earth News Rebel Show. Please join our website. It's freethinkingvoice.org. There's many good topics on there. We've only got about 8 minutes left, David. I do apologise, but we're going to have you on the US show in the future, in the next 2 weeks, and you'll be back on this station shortly after. So just sort of sum up what you know, and that'll be it for tonight.
Well, it kind of comes down to this. Basically, what I'm saying is that there is undersea earthquakes, there is sonar, there is oil industry air guns, there's explosives. All of these things are creating pressure changes in the marine environment. The pressure changes, in turn, are changing the volume of the sinus cavities in the whale's head and causing an injury. When this injury occurs, it knocks out their biosonar. Basically, they are lost at sea. They have no idea which way they're going. They start swimming with the flow, and the next thing you know, they end up on the beach. Now, a lot of people might say, well, wait a minute, the scientists don't tell us that. Well, the scientists don't tell you nothing about that, because the Navy and the oil industry don't want to talk about barotrauma. Now, the main reason they don't want to talk about barotrauma is because the Marine Mammal Protection Act in the United States says that the government must protect the whales to the best available scientific knowledge. So if there is no scientific knowledge, there's no protection. So they got this little trick here. Let's don't have any scientific knowledge about barotrauma. Let's don't have any scientific knowledge about how whales navigate. And then we can skirt around the law. So the Navy and the oil industry basically tricked the American public and the whole damn world by withholding information, not necessarily withholding information, but refusing to generate best available scientific knowledge. So scientists can't deny what I'm telling you because they don't know nothing about it. How are they going to say barotrauma is not the cause of all whale strandings if they're ignorant to the subject? And they are ignorant to the subject. Anybody doubts that, go to your library, go on your computer, and come back with all kinds of stuff that says barotrauma is safe on whales. It is not there. Barotrauma is the reason why whales beach themselves, and the reason why it's unknown is it's just one big massive cover-up. I'm sorry to say that, but that's what's going on. And they've fooled the public for 50 years, and the public are going along with it. They've been trained like blind pigs. To believe everything the scientists say, and the scientists have been lying to them all these years. So,
it's the missing area of research is the big clue here. Why?
It's not a missing area of research. It's a purposeful hiding of a subject, a topic. It's a taboo topic in the Navy and a taboo topic in the oil industry.
So
don't talk about it.
So that information, David, exists somewhere.
It exists in common sense.
Yeah.
Well, here's what we can do. Here's how we can prove whales. All you have to do to prove whales are injured and lost their sense of direction is prove they're going with the current. I mean, That simple observation, whales swim, stranded whales are always swimming with the flow of the current when they go ashore. That simple observation has eluded marine mammal scientists. I mean, they're so blind at the beach that they can't even see it. And all you have to do is start thinking that the whales can't navigate and start looking at the videos. You can see it. The other day at the stranding in Scotland, this poor whale, they let him go, and he couldn't go. He just went around in circles, slamming into the rocks, just totally unable to navigate. And they have all these little tricks. They release these whales with the flow of current is washing out. You know, they have a timing of when they can release them. They can only release them when the current is going out to sea. So the current directs the whales out to sea, and they pat themselves on the back and say, "We saved these whales." It's all bull crap, and it's all a joke.
David, I'm jumping in there because I want to. We've got your website and your Facebook on the chat, but I would like you to put it on the audio side for us as well, because there's an MP3 of this that people listen to afterwards that's on our website, and that we'll put there your details. Would you just tell everyone where they can find this information on your website, David?
Just go to deafwhale.com, DEAFwhale.com, and start looking around. It's all over them. It's all over them.
And what would they search for your Facebook, or would they find that through deafwhale.com?
Deaf Whale Society.
Deaf Whale Society.
That's
right.
It.
So
Deaf
it's
Whale
to go to Deaf Whale Society search that for the Facebook, and deafwhale.com for the actual website. Now, I've read that website, Dave, and it's really, really interesting. We need more time with you to cover the rest of the stuff, really, don't we? Because there's a lot more.
Yeah, there's so much more. I mean, we're leaving the evidence. I mean, I didn't get into the proof. The proof is there. It's just how you look at it. And I would love to go ahead and tell everybody that wants to listen just exactly how to look.
I want you to do that. I really do, because we need to hear the other half of this. And to do that, we need to get you back on another show on the US side, and then repeat this on this side, so we get both sides of the show. If that's okay with you, David, to finish off the story of this.
I will tell you this, Kevin. I will tell you this right now. Simply knowing that the whales are going with the flow and they cannot navigate will change the way you look at strandings for the rest of your life. Every time you see a picture or a video of a whale and you realize that these animals are being washed ashore by the current, they're going to the sandy beach because the current builds the sandy beach, this is going to change you. And it's going to take you a while, but you're going to start to say, my God, this Captain Dave is right.
I've been told. Sorry, David. I've been told the time's up now. We have another show starting on the top of the hour, so I've got you booked in for Saturday the 27th on Orion, and you can come back on Sunday the 28th in the evening, which will be Monday morning. It's a bit technical. 6 o'clock UK time. So it'll be like an hour before.
Okay, sounds good to me.
Really tremendous what you've told us so far, David, honestly. And I look forward to hearing a lot more, because this is interesting stuff. You've gone into an area that's been left, and you've really got into something here.
I've only touched the surface.
Well,
wait till you hear the rest of the story.
We shall enjoy hearing it.
Okay.
We'll have to test out Skype beforehand.
Yeah. We'll do a test. Thank you very much, David.
Thank you, David.
Okay. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, that was the Earth News Rebel Show with me, Andy Peach, and Kevin Bull. We'll see you Sunday night at 6 o'clock. Visit freethinkingvoice.org and deafwhale.com. Good evening, and up next is the Boxing Vicar. Look forward to his show. Let's have a coffee, and he'll be here soon.